All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today for How to Get Yours, Claim Your Worth, and Realize Your Dreams, featuring award-winning media executive, author, entrepreneur, and mother, Amy DuBois Barnett. My name is Natalie Madeira Cofield, and I am the founder of Walker's Legacy. Founded in 2009 and named in honor of Madam C.J. Walker, Walker's Legacy was created with a mission to cultivate an ecosystem of access designed to inspire, equip, and engage a global network of professional and entrepreneurial women of color. You can learn more about Walker's Legacy by joining us online at www.walkerslegacy.com. Before we get started, I'd like to say thank you to our title partner, Accelerate with Google, for their continued partnership in making today possible. So let's get started with today's program. Do you want more from your job, your man, your life? We are proud to feature today one-on-one with Amy DuBois Barnett, current executive editor for ESPN and former editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar, Teen People, and Ebony Magazine. During today's program, we will learn Amy's strategies for transforming from awkward, insecure people pleaser to a strong, independent woman. I'll read a little bit of Amy's biography for those of you who don't know. Amy DuBois Barnett is an award-winning print and online media executive, writer, and motivator. She is the author of an empowering advice book for women, Get Yours, How to Have Everything You Ever Dreamed of, and more. Most recently, she has held positions as the former editor-in-chief of Ebony Magazine and deputy editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar. Prior to Harper's Bazaar, Barnett was the managing editor of Teen People, becoming the first African-American woman in the country to head a mainstream consumer magazine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're extremely excited. I know I personally can say that you're someone that I've personally looked up to and followed for quite some time, and it's exciting to have the opportunity to interview you. So what we've done is we've actually taken some questions from those who are watching us today and compiled them. And I'll start off just kind of with, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and about how the transition has been from Ebony to ESPN.
Sure. I mean, the transition has been sort of amazing because it's not just from Ebony to ESPN. I relocated from Chicago to Los Angeles. So, you know, I'm now living in the sunshine, which I have to say I am so sorry to everybody who's still back in the Midwest and in Chicago and on the East Coast right now. I hate to rub it in, but, you know, it's kind of nice over here on the West Coast. I'm kind of feeling like a convert right now. But, you know, really it was a big transition also professionally, obviously, right? Because I was going from running the country's oldest and largest African-American focused magazine, this iconic brand in our community, to working at ESPN, this behemoth of a media company focused on sports. And now I'm working with them to help them launch a digital entity targeting the African-American and Latino audiences. So it's going from a smaller company running a huge iconic brand to working for a huge company launching a new brand. So it's in a digital space versus the print space. So it's a completely different professional adventure and a personal adventure as I look outside at these swaying palm trees. So the whole thing is brand new.
So some of the women wanted to know, from your perspective, how do you know when you're ready to take a transition within your career, within your company, and make a new move to another organization, or even to kind of pivot your career in life?
I think when you get comfortable. My whole philosophy is centered around the idea that you have to be uncomfortable. You have to be a little bit afraid to move forward. You have to embrace fear as a sign of growth. That's one of the core tenets of my Get Yours philosophy, is embracing fear as growth. And so when you start to get too comfortable, when you kind of do your job in your sleep, when you feel like you've hit a plateau, when you feel like everything around you has become too easy, that's when you're not growing anymore, right? And you're ready to take on the next challenge. You have to be a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit afraid in order to become everything you're meant to be and realize all of your possibilities as a professional, certainly, but also as a person.
And so, how do you personally kind of find the confidence to move forward in your fear? I know that's something that paralyzes a lot of people from taking risks with their business, from taking risks with their career. the fear of failure. And for some people, actually, the fear of success is a great paralyzer for them too.
Right, I know. It's interesting. It's hard, right? It's hard to kind of drum up the confidence. It's easy for me to say, oh, just, be afraid. But then it's like, I'm afraid though. Like I'm actually afraid. But I mean, for me, the way I do it, okay, there's a fruit fly buzzing around my face.
A little mad.
If I do this, I'm not crazy, I swear. Oh, I think I got him. Suckers move fast. Anyway, so for me, I didn't have this fear innately, right? It wasn't like I was born with this, incredible fear. As a matter of fact, I had to kind of learn it, because I was very insecure for a long time. I was very awkward for a long time, and for me, the confidence came when I started to live my own life. I say I bring fruit into work every day, so I've got like work over here, which I'm really excited about. I'm just less excited about the fruit flies that they bring. But anyway, so for me, it was more about getting comfortable in my own skin, and really accepting that this is my life and that nobody else can live my life for me and that I own my life. And therefore, it's really imperative to make decisions based around what I personally believe is right for me and what's going to make me happy and what is driving, my own passions, not the desires and goals and passions that somebody else has for me, but what I really view as my life. And so when I started to make decisions based on my own passion and my own goals, I got very comfortable in my own skin. And that comfort made me confident because I was like, you know what, this is mine. I'm living my own life. I'm doing my own thing. Nobody else can tell me who to hang out with, what to do for a living, where to go. This is my own life of my creation. And when you feel that in your soul, it makes you very confident because you're like, well, I'm doing what I want to do. That's it. And you start to get very comfortable in your own skin. And so I draw from that comfort or from that sense of self and of sort of preservation of my own dreams and goals to I draw from that to take the risks that I need to take in order to take advantage of all the opportunities that swing open in front of me.
So, Amy, you talked a little bit about finding your passion, and I mean, you've had and continue to have a very impressive career. There are a lot of women of all ages that really look up to the things that you've done, and that's, again, why it's an honor to interview you. What made you get started in the media industry, in journalism and communication, in this space? Like, what was the big driver for you? Did you see someone doing something and say, as a little girl, I want to be just like that when I grow up? Did you have a mentor that talked to you a little bit about career opportunities?
Right.
Kind of hear how you got your start.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words about my career. I mean, I really appreciate that. But just FYI to you and to everybody else out there, there is no ladder, right? It doesn't exist. There's no like, I'm going to climb the ladder. No, like a career is a jungle gym. You're going back and forth, you're going in and out, you're going up and down and sideways, and sometimes you're hanging by your knees upside down. I mean, there's so many different things that happen to you. Everybody's got successes and failures. And so I just want people to understand it's not like I've been, progressively moving forward in my career and up the ladder. It's a whole sort of texture, nuanced experience. And that hopefully that'll give some people comfort because, people think, oh my God, I've taken a step, lateral step or a step backward. I'm like, no, it's okay. This is part of building a career and a life for yourself. And, it was really interesting for me. I took a very circuitous route to journalism. It wasn't like I started off, when I was young and wanted to be a journalist. I mean, I actually started off my career in finance because I spent a lot of time being very, insecure about what I wanted to do and not knowing, living somebody else's dreams for me, right? So I started off in finance, hated that. I transitioned into fashion. And then I eventually started to really kind of honor the voice in my head that was telling me, like, listen, you're a writer. You should be writing. You should be writing. So that's when I went to grad school to study creative writing. And while I was doing that, I started working for some websites and eventually a magazine. And then I found my calling. Then it just turned out that there was there are a bunch of skills that you need to not just to work at the highest levels in media, particularly in magazines. It's not just a matter of being a good writer. It's that you have to be able to you have to be able to kind of build the brand and manage a big P&L and kind of be dichotomous in that you're working with both visual elements and textual elements. You're also dichotomous in that you're working with creatively with content and also with sales and marketing initiatives. So there's a whole lot that goes into it that it just turns out is somehow keys into a lot of things that I'm passionate about. So it's been great, but I did take a circuitous route. It wasn't like I since the age of 6 was like, I want to, run media brands. That never happened.
No, I mean, I think even that is kind of inspiring for people, because you're right. A lot of people feel as though they have to have this kind of list of, this is how I'm going to get here, and this is how I'm going to get here, and this is how I'm going to get here. And if anything deviates from that list, they feel as though they failed. And one of the things that I'm hearing from you is that, there really is no failure. It's just a fail forward. You're moving in lots of directions. And in some instances, even a position change that may have a title change, because we oftentimes get very caught up on titles.
Right.
May actually be the more beneficial role for you that gives you more opportunity and exposure than the one that came along with the large title. So along those lines, can you tell us a little bit about a failure that you maybe have had, or a challenge that you've had specifically in your career, and how you overcame that?
Right. I mean, that's a very good question, and one that people don't ask me a lot, and I think it's a useful question, because you learn as much from your failures as you do from your successes, right? And one of the failures that I had, one of them, I mean, I've had many failures in my life, but one of the first big ones I had, or was involved in at least, was one of the first, or the first magazine I ever worked on, a magazine called Fashion Almanac. And it was back in the, I'm aging myself here, but it was in the late 90s. And there was this company that started this big, it was actually the first luxury style website, ever, or something like that. And then they started a magazine to go along with it. And I was sort of in a senior role at the website, and then they put me in a senior role at the magazine. I had no idea. It was the first magazine I'd ever worked at. I had no idea what I was doing at all on any level. I mean, I had no idea how to write a cover line. I had no idea how to lay out a page or write any display type or anything like that. And so the magazine, not like it was entirely my fault, but certainly I had something to do with it, because I couldn't save it because I didn't know what I was doing. The magazine ended up failing, because nobody there knew what they were doing, and we were all sort of, it was like the blind leading the blind. And so this magazine that had so much promise ended up failing kind of spectacularly, because we were all, novices and didn't know what we were doing. But it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about how to manage the business of media, how to run marketing and PR campaigns, how to structure, the architecture of a magazine, what's resonant, content and what isn't. And this is great. This is something that I learned back in, 98, 97, 98. So it was a great lesson to learn very early in my career.
And I feel like even with that lesson, it sounds like a startup, right? It sounds like it was a startup company. And women who are watching right now who work for large media corporations, and there are some that are thinking of or have their own media company at this moment. And one of the things that a lot of times people struggle with, particularly women of color and people of color, is access to finances and access to resources. So when you've had an opportunity to work for lots of different types of companies along your time and your tenure, what would you say to someone who is looking at a lack of capital or a lack of access to talent as the biggest impediment to them moving forward? I mean, we both know that the reality is that you're never going to have everything that you need to move forward successfully. And if those are the two biggest impediments that have been identified, have you ever worked for a company or been in a situation where you've had to kind of make magic or miracles with a limited budget or with a limited team? And what strategies did you use for that?
Belly laugh. Yes. Why, yes, Natalie. Yes, I have worked in companies where I had to make do with limited resources. I have worked in many resource-challenged environments. But I think there's two different questions there. Maybe one is, as entrepreneurs, one seems like more of an entrepreneurial question, and the other seems more like a kind of tactical question about how you manage in a resource-challenged environment, and they're kind of related. You know, I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, you know, it's very interesting. It's very interesting how on one hand, there are very few of us who have organically just have the resources that we would need to self-fund a startup. You know, and a lot of us don't have a lot, you know, experience, or people around us, you know, telling us how do you go out for funding? How do you crowdfund an idea? How do you, you know, what resources are there? This is partially why your wonderful organization exists, in order to give people the tools and resources that they need to be able to, you know, help them along their professional route. You know, conversely, this is a very sort of rich time for entrepreneurs of color and for women entrepreneurs to take advantage of certain kinds of programs that are out there, because people are recognizing that there's very little diversity in the universe of entrepreneurship, and they want more, particularly in technology. So there are a lot of resources out there that didn't exist before, just to assist with balancing the demographics of entrepreneurs, again, particularly in the tech world. So that's kind of neat. In terms of a resource challenge environment, and I've made miracles with some glue stick, and a damn stapler, damn Sharpie. Talk about, I'm making a magazine. You know, gotta do. You know, it's. I will say this: I have worked for huge international, highly matrixed media conglomerates, and I have worked for small startup companies, you know, with one or two brands, right? And there's pros and cons of both. There really are. I mean, it's not like you work for a big company and everything is like, you know, you're just like, woohoo, you know, everything is like done for you. No, not at all. I mean, it's a very, these are very complex organizations. Approvals take a very long time. You've got your bosses have bosses, and your bosses' bosses have bosses, and you know, blah, blah, blah. And you've got to work cross-departmentally, and, you know, make sure that there's, you know, buy-in for all the relevant stakeholders. And there's a lot of stuff that makes it very challenging to move in an innovative way, right? And when you work for a small company, you got nothing but innovation and nimbleness, because there's really very little. Usually you're like, you know, you or your boss are like the last person in the chain of command. If you're in any kind of, you know, senior role, and, you know, if you have an idea, I mean, you might not have the resources to execute it in a, you know, best in class kind of way, but you can at least kind of experiment and execute your idea. And what we've seen these days is that some of the most interesting ideas and the most successful ideas are ones that are innovative and don't require, you know, a lot of capital and resources, you know, # lean startup, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that it kind of makes you more creative, you know, when you have to, we don't have a lot of resources, and it makes you more nimble. I mean, you work your tush off. I mean, I've worked around the clock at those organizations, but that's kind of cool too, because you're also in it together. So it fosters stronger teamwork in a lot of ways. So, you know, there's pros and cons of both.
So, I mean, just to kind of summate some of the things that we just heard here, one, you know, you talked a little bit about the media industry from a media tech perspective in terms of the startup situation and opportunities and resources that may exist for women who are starting media companies that are mostly online, right? And opportunities for them to connect with resources to support their efforts. Then we also talked just a little bit about being cash strapped, but then also being bureaucracy strapped. And those are kind of two polar opposites that exist, where you may have more funds, you might have to have far more red tape to go through. For many of us, we know you as, you know, whether you want this or not, as a person who kind of single-handedly turned around Ebony Magazine. And, you know, I would love to hear from you how to turn around an organization. You restored and revitalized a brand that was historical, but also going through challenges with meeting the market where it needed to be. And you really had a great way of connecting and resonating with a broader, younger audience of people that helped to lead to the sustainability of the magazine and created quite a creative element to it. How would you advise someone about what it might take for them to be a turnaround CEO? Because that's the difference. To me, that's different. There's a startup CEO, there's a turnaround CEO, and then there's just kind of like your management and operations CEO that's just there to make sure that everything keeps flowing well, that's already either been started up or turned around. And you've kind of been in both or all three of those spaces.
Right. Well, I've definitely kind of known as like the turnaround queen these days. It's like a pro and a con. It's like, if something's really messed up, call Amy. She'll come in and fix it. I'm like, yay. But I do appreciate your kind words about Ebony. I mean, that's an iconic brand. Truthfully, it was just an honor for me to be able to touch the brand, right? This thing that we all grew up with, and certainly to be able to affect some core change in the brand was the honor of my career to date. So I'm really grateful for that experience. And you are right though. I have now redesigned, remade, God, how many brands now? 3 brands pretty much from top to bottom, and launched a couple of other ones. Honey Magazine I redesigned, Teen People, and Ebony. It's a very interesting process. I think that the first thing for me is always to take a good hard look at who the target demographic is. Who is it that we're trying to speak to? Is this the most robust target demographic that this particular brand can possibly reach? Are there additional ways that we can reach the core target demographic? Are there additional demographics that we can talk to? Where does the target demographic over-index? And for example, when I was looking at Ebony, I was looking at African Americans. I did a kind of some research and an examination of the competitive set. I realized that African Americans highly over-index in 2 magazines, in ESPN the magazine, and in Oprah. So these are in O, right? So these are 2 mainstream magazines where African Americans highly over-index. And so I was like, okay, well, how could I take advantage of that? I probably can't do enough sports content any better than ESPN could do sports content. But I might be able to do some empowering content in a more highly targeted way, so that I'm speaking directly to African Americans, not better than O, but just in a more, like I said, targeted and focused way, so that it felt very specific to the demographic. So I focused on that, and I created, as part of the redesign, a whole new department called Elevate that had empowering and elevating content very directly targeted toward African Americans. So that's sort of step 1 for me, is really thinking about who I'm talking to. And then I really just do a drill down on the brand, just this looking at what are the brand's, core tenets, what are the core philosophies, what's the architecture of the brand, like what is this brand, what is it saying, what is it doing, what's its story, what's specific about the brand, what's unique about the brand, and just kind of doing a kind of a brand analysis. And then really thinking through what's already working, because you don't want to just scrub a brand for the sake of scrubbing it, and you want to, especially with something like an Ebony. With the Honey, it was different because it was such a new brand. I pretty much just scrubbed everything and started over on a certain level, just because it was so new. There wasn't a lot of loyalty to anything because it hadn't had a chance to develop an audience yet. But Ebony, of course, had 65 years to develop an audience before I got there. So really just looking at what's working and how to respect the existing readers and users without alienating them, and not alienating them, and while attracting this new demographic. And how do I find this new demographic? Let me think about the targeting and who am I speaking to and what have you. And then after you sort of do all that analysis, then just comes the fun part, which is, okay, well, this is the creative part, right? Like what's a creative way to tell this brand story? What kind of content, what kind of visuals, what kind of palette, what kind of fonts, what kind of, content, what sort of topics, what's saleable, what can marketing, what kind of, topics will our marketing department be able to create initiatives around? What can our sales department sell? What will our core demographic love? What might attract new a new audience, what it ends up just being like a fun element, a surprising element. And so all of these things kind of wrap together in this months-long process that ends up hopefully with a new and successful brand.
So identify a niche, first understand the market, identify the niche, build quality programming and a quality brand around it, and then continue the execution. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to take it somewhere else with this, Amy, and try to create another parallel here. We just talked about the turnaround of a company. What about the brand of a business? What about the turnaround of a personal brand? And what about the creation of your personal brand? Because a lot of times, and even with you, right, you have brand capital that you also were able to bring to the table when you've been at companies like Ebony. I mean, people follow you as Amy DuBois Barnett, and they also were following Ebony. So they were following both of you at the same time, and it was a perfect confluence of two big brands coming together. What about the woman who wants to establish herself as a business brand personally, and then establish a brand for her business? So what would you tell to someone who's looking to design a personal brand for themselves?
I guess two things, or well, several things. I talk to people about this whenever I give speeches or if I mentor young folks in a professional capacity. I always talk about develop an expertise. If you can develop an expertise in one area, then that is one of the easier paths to become better known in social media, because you just become, an authority topic is you choose, and also helps you become a trusted. This fruit fly, I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna get him. Okay. But it does help you become like a trusted ambassador, because that's really the other component of a successful brand is trust, right? You really want to be able to trust a brand, to execute on its mission, whatever its mission is, right? And that's a corporate brand or a personal brand. You want to be able to have that trust. And so part of the trust, like I said, is having the authority, right? So people will trust you because they believe that you have the knowledge, behind whatever the topic is that you positioned yourself to, around. And they also trust you because you're consistent. You're consistent. I mean, you have integrity as a brand. Like, you would never, for example, see, a picture of me, I don't know, clubbing a seal. That's ridiculous. Or, or mistreating a woman or something like that. Or, there's never going to be I don't want to reference any. Well, there's never going to be a video that will emerge of me, haranguing, a woman, who is helping me in a sales capacity, for example. That just won't happen, because I wouldn't do it personally, because I just not am not that type of person. But also, just from a branding perspective, you never want to do anything that would negatively impact the integrity of your brand. You always want to be consistent, around the message that you put forth to people. And I also think that being transparent and accessible is another part of creating a personal brand that's maybe sort of slightly new, but is important in this day of social media. You just really trying to respond as much as possible, and to be a real person, as opposed to kind of like, oh, everything about me is like golden all the time. Like, no, like some days I'm like, really tired, or there's a fruit fly buzzing around my head, and it's super annoying, like in the middle of a Google Hangout, like that sucks, but I mean, this is life, right? So, it's just, that's part of it too. It's being able to both convey the authority because of your experience and your messaging and your consistency, your professional personal integrity. And it's also, kind of being transparent and being authentic and having fun in your life, and helping people get to know you as a person.
So all good. I have a question for you now. We're going to kind of move into another space, but you talked a little bit about you being awkward and coming out of that. you're in the media space, which makes you very externally focused. And not just externally focused, but it's also, a lot of schmoozing with celebrities.
Yeah.
And how do feel confident, comfortable? What advice would you give to a woman, in some instances, a younger woman who wants to be a PR or have her own PR company, work with celebrities, to not fall victim to kind of being part of the celebrity groupie situation, to maintain themselves professionally? Obviously, there's a very thin line that starts to appear when you're a successful, attractive woman in an industry where there are lots of people and lots of men that have stature and prestige. How did you balance that and manage that? Were you able to build real friendships and real partnerships with people, and have the confidence to do that? Going with that?
Well, there are so many different questions mixed in there.
There were.
Let's see. So yes, I've dealt with, hundreds of celebrities, maybe even thousands at this point in my career. That is definitely true. So just overarchingly, when you're dealing with celebrities, I think the biggest thing, and this is going to sound so easy, but it's really real. I mean, celebrities can tell when you're like impressed by them. You know what I mean? When you're like overly impressed, they can feel it. They feel the energy, and it's kind of off-putting. The thing about them is, like, they're just people with a successful career. Some of them are more successful than others. I mean, you can be a successful fireman, you can be a successful restaurant owner, you can be a successful actor, you can be a successful doctor, there's a lot of different, like, fields of success. They just happen to be successful in a particular field, which you give them respect for, but it doesn't mean that they're somehow transcended, mortal status and they've become like gods walking among men. That's absurd. These are just people, right? So and the more you can actually feel like that and treat them like that, the more that they like you and respect you, because they realize that you're just like, hey, what's up, man? Nice to meet you. As opposed to like, ooh, like, that's not cool, right? So I guess piece of advice number one, be cool.
Yeah.
And then also, and then especially as a woman, right? Because I mean, as a woman, especially coming up in New York during the whole era in which urban culture was at its zenith, and dealing with a lot of male music executives and artists, during that period of time, who had a lot of expectations about what many women, particularly younger, not ugly women, are going to do for them in order to put their own careers forward, whatever. That was, I don't want to say a challenge, because it wasn't really a challenge, because I was always very mindful of what was happening around me. I never got caught up in it, because I saw there was enough cautionary tales around me of women who were smart, smart, attractive women who had fallen, succumbed to the lure of, some random executive or artist or whoever, or actor, whoever it was, and then kind of sort of taking themselves on this downward spiral in which they became known, but during which I guess they became known as somebody who was interested in the attentions of, bold-faced name people, right? And there's no faster way to, shoot your career in the foot than bold-faced name people. That's how you lose respect instantly. You will never hear a story about me and any kind of celebrity unless it's a lie, because it doesn't exist. It's the line I've always drawn in the sand. I'm like, no, this is not happening, ever, not ever. And never once in my career have I even been tempted to go in that direction, not really, because I was very aware that either I could be that woman, or I could be a woman with a successful career. And it's a sort of a choice, because it's really hard to do both. And it's, I don't say it's unfortunate, because that's probably not unfortunate, but it's really, really hard to do both. You kind of have to make a little bit of a choice. Either you want to support somebody else's dreams in some kind of capacity, we'll just like nicely phrase it that way, or you want to develop your own dreams. And I want to develop my own dreams. So I'm kind of weaving in a few things to my answer, but hopefully.
No, it's absolutely perfect. And while you were talking, I was thinking, you know, for women who don't work in the media industry and who are not around celebrity, celebrity then becomes kind of synonymous with their boss or the CEO of the organization or anyone who has authority or power or exudes that kind of persona in their workspace. And I think it's important, especially for younger women, to understand how to manage themselves and maneuver themselves so that women respect them, because it's easy to lose respect of women too who
Right.
see this activity as and those are your colleagues and your counterparts, as well as the men who work with you in this space and the women that come after you that work with those same men and how they choose to work with those women as a result of what you have done. Because nothing
what is very interesting also though is that there is something very powerful about being a like a smart, stylish, kind of put together, confident woman. You know, like there's something very, very powerful in that. You know, and I'm not saying on any level to like wield your sexuality in some kind of, you know, untoward way. I don't mean that at all. But there's something really powerful in that level of confidence and authority when you're able to kind of meld the two in a seamless way, and sort of organically walk in somewhere and, you know, sit down and have that presence, and then be able to have the information and you know, business acumen to back it up. It is a very powerful stance. So that's not to be forgotten either.
Yes. Okay, so Amy, let's talk personally here. So we kind of just, you know, talked a little bit about managing relationships as women. And one of the things that we get asked a lot by women, I think every time I do one of these, some of the questions that come in are, how do you manage work and personal life? Is it possible to, the cliche question, have it all? And I'll kind of let you answer that and then dive in deeper.
Oh, is it possible to have it all? You know, yes and no. You know, I definitely believe that it is possible to have a strong relationship, to have a strong, you know, marriage if that's what you're interested in, to have a child if that's what you're interested in, to travel, to, you know, do all these things. I think it is possible to have that and a successful career. And for me, one feeds the other. You know, I am a way better executive when I've, you know, have vacations and I'm spending time with my friends and I'm spending time with my son. I mean, I'm a better person, which then informs how I do business. And that's real. I think that there's people out there who don't take their vacations, or, you know, I always tell people, like, don't do that. You think that you're making yourself a better executive or that you're becoming more desirable professionally. You know, I think that's actually completely untrue. Even if it's a staycation, even if you don't go anywhere, take the time. You know, take the time to enrich yourself, and that will inform everything else that you do in your life. I do think, you know, though, as you're thinking about your structuring your personal life, that choices do have to be made. You know, for example, if you want to be a partner at a major law firm, right, you have to know that you're probably going to be working about 70 to 80 to 90 hours a week, right? So maybe, and I'm just going to be real, maybe if you want to have children, you have one, you don't have four, you know, and that's real talk, you know, because it might be hard to balance four. You could probably do one, you know, maybe two, you know, but if you have four kids, you probably can't do that effectively and work 80 and 90 hours a week. So it's a matter of just looking at your lifestyle choices. You know, what kind of partner do you want? I mean, I talk about this all the time. You know, choose your partner well. You know, choose somebody who really understands what your goals are and who you think can be supportive to you, you know, in some kind of major way, not necessarily financially, although that's always fun, you know, but who's supportive of the dreams that you have and the path that it's going to take for you to fulfill those dreams, whatever that path is. You know, it might be like you want to start up a company and you're going to make, you know, $15,000 a year for the next 3 years while you're in startup mode. You know, what the kind of sacrifices that it's going to take to go through that process, you know, or, you know, maybe it's that you want to make a 7-figure income, you know, plus an 8-figure bonus, you know, but you're going to be working 100 hours a week, you know, so are you going to have somebody in your life who's willing to make that sacrifice, you know, for X number of years? I mean, it's just walking into this with a clear head. But I really, really do believe in having a personal life, and in the positive effects that can have, not just on you personally, but also on you as a business person.
Do you feel like women kind of have a double burden of that? I feel like when, we interview men, or when men are interviewed and talked to about their success techniques, the question about balancing life, and work is not one that comes up very often.
No,
And
no,
yeah, and in some instances, it's almost, as though if you're a woman and you're not married or you don't have kids, that you're not really a complete woman, no matter what you've done with your career. Do you feel that women kind of have that type of burden, or that sense of burden about having something in every single facet of their life to say that they're officially accomplished?
Right. I mean, we know the deal. It's, women are judged with a different, set of standards than men are. Men are judged by their, the money they make, and they're just, this is overarching, I'm generalizing, but men are judged by the money they make and the careers they have, right? Women are judged by how attractive we are and whether or not we're married and have children. I mean, just generally broad strokes, right? And that carries over, therefore, into the way people look at us as female executives, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're not just saying, oh, what kind of deals did you bring in? What kind of, whatever. They're like, oh, so, but you're 40. Are you married yet? You don't have kids? Yeah. Or how are you going to possibly balance like having you're pregnant? Ooh, how are you possibly going to be balance having, this new title as, executive VP with your third child? I mean, there's a lot of, but there's a lot of that goes on. And it's tough because you really, because it's sort of real on one hand, right? In that women, unfortunately, but realistically, have a disproportionate amount of household responsibilities, right? It just sort of is what it is. Like, I don't know if we can, maybe in some households, it evens out because you got a very particular kind of a partner, but for the most part, just from a realistic perspective, women are going to have a disproportionate amount of responsibility with regard to raising the kids and running the house. That's kind of the deal. I mean, I'm sort of relaxing into it now. For a while, I was like raging against it. Like, how could that be? We've got to divide it 50-50. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. I think that there'll be greater peace if I realize that this is sort of just how it works. And, and partially because I'm slightly better at it, so. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm still talking in generalizations, and I'm sure people out there are like, what? How could you possibly say that? But, there is a moment in which, in your mid-40s, when you do kind of get real about the way life works, right? So, so on one hand, there is that sort of disproportionate amount of household responsibilities that women have. On the other hand, it's completely unfair and annoying. You never ask a man, how could you possibly balance? Oh, your wife's pregnant. Boy, how are you going to, possibly have, that kid and, become CEO of the Fortune 500 company or whatever it is. You just never hear that because nobody assumes that the man is going to have any sort of engaged and active responsibility with regard to the child or the household responsibility or whatever it is. And that's very frustrating, but again, I am trying to kind of relax into what it means on a certain level, because for me at least, the more I rage against it, the more I'm like, I end up spinning my wheels, So for me, I focus on being a very successful executive, across metrics, and I focus on living a very full and rich personal life. And I focus on making clear-headed decisions so that I can do both. And that's just how I handle it. I mean, I also don't beat myself up. I think women beat ourselves up too. Like, we're like, oh my God, I didn't go to that PTA meeting, I'm a horrible mother, or, shoot, my kid got sick and I had to miss that, conference call, or and I'm a horrible executive, or, whatever it is, or, I'm a horrible fight. But we beat ourselves up, right? And I've stopped doing that. I'm like, you know what, I can't make it to the the mother's tea at 4 o'clock at my kid's school. Like, that's not going to happen, right? If they need me to write a check, I will do that. I will come to all of the performances. I will go to the conferences. I will do everything I can, but I'm not going to be able to chaperone the field trip, you know, to the museum. That's not going to happen. You know, doesn't mean I'm a bad mom. You know, as a matter of fact, you know, there are many arguments out there that say that I'm an awesome mom because I'm showing my son, you know, an example of what a like strong and independent woman looks like. You know, and if my son gets sick, or if I've got to take him, you know, conversely, if he gets sick, or if I've got to do something with him that does cut into my work time, I'm not going to beat myself up for that either. This is my life. You know, this is my life, and this is what makes me a better, more interesting, more informed executive in general. So that is another part of it. Don't beat yourself up.
So, Amy, you mentioned, you know, an example of a strong, independent woman. And for those women, again, of all ages, that are looking to be mentored by someone, what advice would you give them on finding a mentor? And what role has kind of mentorship played for you, whether you've received the mentorship or given the mentorship? And this is the second to last question.
You know, it's hard to find a mentor, right? Because it's not like it just, you know, like there's like a, you know, mentor school and people, you know, and even when you do find somebody that you admire, that you think could help you along your career, how do you get their attention? And then how do you maintain their attention in a engaged yet, you know, respectful of their time sort of a way, you know? And I will say this, for me, mentoring women has been one of the great joys of my career in my life. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to you know, Black folks and specifically women about their lives, their careers, their relationships, you know, whatever it is. And I somehow feel like I've got this message to impart, and being able to do so through my book and through the one-on-one mentoring has been tremendously gratifying for me. So I love it. You know, but I'm also a very busy person. And so there are specific ways that people who want to engage with me can do so that are more effective. So I guess I would tell people out there who are looking for mentors, if you meet somebody that you think, you know, is somebody you admire, who you want to continue to communicate with, you know, definitely, you know, establish that. Just say, hey, listen, I would love to, you know, stay in touch with you. You know, would you mind terribly if I, you know, periodically email you with an update, or, you know, with a question or something like that, that shows that you're respectful of their time. And then you follow that up with an email just saying, hey, it was nice to meet you. I'm, you know, really thrilled that, you know, we're now in communication, whatever. And then you kind of leave it alone for a while, you know. You don't bombard them, because it's you know, because that sort of becomes obviously overkill, and it makes it too straining on that other person's time. If you sort of, you know, reach out to them periodically, and every now and then when you reach out, it doesn't always have to be a question that requires a response. It could just be like, hi, you know, so-and-so, I just want to update you about what's happening with me. I've changed jobs, I've gotten a promotion, you know, I lost my job and now I'm looking for something, or I've moved, or I'm this, or I'm that. You know, no need to respond. I just wanted you to give a quick update about what's going on in my world. I hope everything is good with you. I read that article about, you know, that great deal you just closed. Congratulations. I'll reach out to you again in a few months, or something like that. So they're still aware of who you are, but they're not always having to hit you back. And then, so when you do reach out with a question, and also when you do that, it shows that you're interested in their lives too. And then and you're following their careers also. But then when you do reach out for a question, it makes them more apt to respond to you, because it's not every other day. And also you've given them some context for what, you know, what you're doing. So you know, I would definitely not shy away from people that you come across that you're interested in talking to. But again, just be very respectful of their time, and ask very, you know, focused, targeted questions when you do so, and update them periodically about what's going on in your life.
So, Amy, we have a couple of questions. I had a personal question that I was going to ask you, but what we're doing is we have a few viewers who have submitted questions to us. And if you don't mind, I may ask you one or two of them really quickly. One is, can you discuss how technology, and this is kind of totally a new topic, just so you're aware, can you discuss how technology and more specifically social media has changed the face of your industry and how you see it continuing to impact it moving forward. And in a way, there is a little bit of a synergy between what you were just talking about, because it seems to me what you were talking also about is, having mentees leverage email and social media as a way to keep engaged with you and keep you abreast of what they're doing without kind of needing to be meeting with you for coffee, tea, and dinner over time that you don't often have. So, but how does that relate to the actual industry and the way that the industry has changed?
I mean, that's kind of a huge question, so I'm not quite sure that I can, I'll just be honest, I'm not sure that I can answer it effectively. I mean, how does technology and social media change media? I think that what you see now is clearly more engagement with audiences. There's less kind of talking at people and giving people information, and there's more of an attempt to have a conversation with people. It's more of like a sort of a peer-to-peer marketplace of communication versus just I'm a big organization, I'm gonna tell you what I want. So that has made it very interesting in terms of all the blogs that have come up and the online media brands that have started, and the vast amounts of social change that are now happening via Twitter in a lot of ways. So I think that you're seeing a greater number of people out there empowered to convey information. There are drawbacks to that, of course, which are that oftentimes it's the people with the biggest megaphone that get the most attention, and those aren't necessarily the people with the best information or the most evolved perspective, right? So you frankly see a lot of some knuckleheads out there who are just loud and sort of saying a lot and getting a lot of attention just because they're loud and they're saying a lot, but they're not necessarily the people who have like I said, the most interesting perspective and the best research techniques and journalistic instincts to put forth the most objective set of information. So there's pros and there's cons, but I for one really am enjoying the textured element of media that has emerged because of the advent of newer technology.
And Amy, in closing, what do you feel has been the biggest challenge for you, being a woman of color specifically, since Walker's Legacy is an organization designed to help encourage and equip women of color, that has been presented to you throughout your career? And how did you overcome that?
So the biggest challenge for me as a woman of color in my career?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess the old adage is true. I mean, I've always had to, in mainstream organizations, do twice as much to get the same amount of credit and respect. And I have so frequently been the only, person of color in the room, or I've so frequently been in a position where I'm trying to prove myself around people that are trying to pigeonhole me, as a person who can only speak to, I can only speak to African Americans, or I can only speak to women, or I'm Black, therefore I must only have an interest in Black issues. I certainly can't, write a story on, Angelina Jolie, for example, because you're a Black person, you have to write it on Halle Berry, or whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of sort of assumptions about the things that I've been interested in, and frankly, my capabilities as an executive, relating to being a woman and really being a woman of color. But it's definitely made me work harder. It's definitely made me work smarter. And there are times when I've worked it to my advantage. Again, when you're in certain situations where having a kind of a presence matters, then you are able to kind of, figure out a way to find an advantage in being a well-spoken, authoritative, intelligent, stylish woman of color. That's something that can be advantageous. So, I don't know. I love it. I wouldn't have
I love it too. So I hear you on that. Well, Amy, I want to thank you on behalf of the entire team of Walker's Legacy, on behalf of our title partner, Accelerate with Google, today for sharing your insights on success with Walker's Legacy and our viewers. I'd also like to thank all of those who joined us online today and submitted questions. They were fantastic and thought-provoking, and they really helped to drive our discussion today. Walker's Legacy looks to bring you insightful, meaningful opportunities for conversation and community, and we hope you found today's program a special opportunity to do such. And we look forward to each and every one of you all engaging with us on National Walker's Legacy Day on May 7th, where we will be having programming across the country in honor of women of color during National Small Business Week 2015. Again, thank you so much, Amy DuBois Barnett, the inspiration and the icon. I'm Natalie Cofield signing off. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.